All right, the recording has started, and this is the April 22nd, 2021 Crossplane community meeting. If you pop in after we get started here, you feel free to add your name to the attendees list there. We'll try to keep that updated. As always, we're going to start with our releases and upcoming milestones, roadmap sort of stuff. The 1.2 release is coming in soon. We are, I think, about a week out from that. So we're, into the feature freeze, code freeze phase there. So, Dan, by the end of the week here, you think that we'll be cutting release branches?
Yep, I'm planning on cutting them either today or tomorrow, and then we'll have our official release on Tuesday.
Right. Excellent. Yeah. So I think that, things that we'd be taking at this point now, kind of in the code freeze area, there is, documentation stuff, maybe user guide stuff, or maybe some critical bugs if somebody finds something that really is, kind of a release blocker, and we want to get it in there before putting that out to the world. Then that's the kind of stuff we'd be taking on now. But mostly it's just baking right now. So we're going to get some final testing and kind of settle things down there to be able to get the 1.2 release out and available on Tuesday. So if anybody finds any, issues or has things that they, think are a good candidate to get in later on at this phase, please do, ping us on Slack, and we can have that conversation, kind of do a triage in real time as things are coming up. So in terms of, roadmap milestones sort of stuff, as a reminder here in the community meeting here, this is a great chance for folks to kind of speak up about issues they think are of high importance. We are in the code freeze for 1.2, so, there aren't going to be any more features or big things getting into the release. But as we move on into the next release, the cadence and the cycle for the 1.3 release, this will be a good chance for folks to speak up and make a case or express their need for particular features and scenarios that are on the roadmap. So I'll bring the board up here real quick. I know in the past community meeting we had talked about some of the higher priority roadmap things, and so the proposed column I think is pretty well up to date in terms of what we've heard for high priority features on the roadmap and impact and unblocking scenarios and things like that. So these first 5 or so I think are pretty. We've gotten some pretty consistent feedback about the importance or need for those. Folks are more than welcome to weigh in now and speak up about an issue that you find important or you'd like to see. So people can jump in on that. There was a particular issue I was looking for on the board here as well too. I'm going to start dragging windows out of the way again.
One that was kind of important there is that required patch policy. So that's one that we've had in progress for a while. It will not go into this release. The reasoning for that is it involves how we currently refer to basically the templated resources or the composed resources when they're going through the composition engine. And so right now, if you're not able to render all of your composites or all of your composed, I guess, then there's basically, it just errors outright and says, I'm not able to do this. This is breaking the use case, or not enabling might be more apt way to say it, an expected use case where you are able to, create a resource in a composition before another one can be created, because it depends on something that's going to get patched back to the composite resource or the claim, and then go through, right? So you temporarily are going to have one of the resources in your composition unavailable. However, you can imagine, right, if you don't have that resource available, when we render them all out, you have a gap in resources there, because we basically can't produce a representation of it. So there's kind of some back and forth on if we are going to have a placeholder there, or we're just going to omit it. This isn't an issue if you're naming your templates in the composition, but for backwards compatibility, we've continued to support the ability to have unnamed templates So there's kind of some complex machinery there that we didn't want to mess with too late in the release cycle, but you can expect that to go into the next one. The only other one I'd mention is that multi-tenant support guide. That is just documentation, and I do plan for that to be in the docs for the 1.2 release on Tuesday.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that was one I wanted to hear about as well too. That's great that it's a docs only change, right? There's no code change there, so that's perfectly reasonable to go in at this phase of the release cycle. Yeah, I'm happy to see that one make it in. That's great, Dan. Thanks for following up on that. Another one that I was we've had it in review for a bit, and I think it's a pretty cool feature as well too. I at this point I don't think we'll be able to get it in for 1.2. It's there's really too much churn at this point. But around patching from multiple sources, I thought that was a really strong feature. So hopefully we can, early on in the 1.3 release cycle, we can get that reviewed and feedback in and go ahead and get that one merged so that we'll have it for 1.3.
Yeah, I think that is a really important one. We've seen a lot of folks bring that up. Another thing I want to mention is most of these kind of like larger feature areas we've talked about have been primarily implemented, at least recently, by myself, Muvafik, or Nick. These are feature areas that are open to anyone in the community to work on, absolutely. And so this is something that folks really want to see. If you have the bandwidth, we are more than happy to support you in that and enable you to do that. Another thing I want to mention is because of the release cadence we have, missing this release isn't that big of a deal because the next one will be coming very, very quickly with a 2-month release cadence. And you can obviously utilize incremental builds of that as well. The last thing I want to mention is a lot of these are for provider AWS here. There are a lot of PRs in flight on provider AWS and some pretty big changes on provider GCP. A lot of the folks on this call have worked on a lot of those changes, and a number of them are very close to getting merged, especially some of those provider AWS ones. And I just want to reiterate that those are not coupled to the Crossplane release cycle. So we can choose to release those at any point. One of the things that has been identified as an important thing for a while, and I think it's even kind of raised in importance lately because of some changes to provider GCP that we'll talk about lately. We need to start having formalized release cadences around these, as well as having release notes so folks are aware of how APIs are changing over time. But all that to say, if you're someone who consumes these providers or works on them, you can obviously have a voice in dictating the kind of cadence we have for those. So as we start to define that, please feel free to speak up and engage in that conversation so we can make sure that, folks' different consumption models are all satisfied with whatever strategies we choose for each provider.
Yeah, thanks for those reminders, Dan, especially about providers not being, coupled to the Crossplane itself, 1.2 release. So yeah, we could still continue making progress on getting those features that are related to, like the AWS services and things like that. Yes, so I think those are some of the things that are in flight that didn't make it for 1.2 that we talked about, like the multi-patch one and high priority, like what we believe is priorities for the community as a whole in the proposed column here. These will get moved onward to a 1.3 board that will open up after we get 1.2 out. But I'll go ahead and open the floor as well to for anybody who has a feature or scenario or desire that they want to bubble up here as a priority for them as well too. I'll take any requests for that right now.
Hey Jared, am I audible? Yeah. So I was thinking about the pluggable webhooks, which is I think kind of critical with resources having a lot of immutable fields and not being able to enforce that through provider. So is there a plan around implementation, or I would like to help with it if possible?
Yeah, was that for the webhooks and validation? Is that what that was for? Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that, that's something that, Muvafik had done, a one-pager design for this a little bit ago and had, made some progress on that. implementation for it was not able to be made progress or finished off, or it's more design heavy and less implementation for 1.2. So so if you are interested in helping contribute in that for like the 1.3 timeframe, then that could certainly be reasonable. And probably a good first step would be to read through at least the design that Moffic had started on, and then probably consult with Moffic and kind of get a conversation going around what the implementation would look like, or are there tasks that could be split up, maybe like what would be the ownership of those tasks, and kind of take it from there.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and if you wouldn't mind just dropping a comment on there mentioning that you'd like to work on that, then we can obviously make sure that's tracked in and stuff like that.
Yeah, I have some thoughts, because we could there are a couple of strong reasons, like strong policies we would like to enforce, right? So I was thinking, instead of just a validation or a mutation webhook, maybe we can consider something more like using OPA and having policies to enforce the same. So that's maybe something to consider, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. And how that fits into the packaging system, and how you also, like request that in your provider. If we want some of those to be turned on by default, or we want, those to be explicitly provided, those are all things that should go into consideration. One thing I would encourage, just from a kind of like design perspective, is trying to keep it flexible early in terms of not committing to any strategies that we're going to have to, support in perpetuity, and keeping that in mind as we design this feature.
Well, awesome, Harsh. Thanks for bringing that up and speaking on that one. Any other input or feedback about roadmap high priority features or anything like that? Okay. All right. Yep. So we can always continue that conversation on Slack or in issues, on GitHub. Anytime that you think something is important, you can always add a comment to an issue, or if there's not an issue, we'll go ahead and open one up. So we can always keep those conversations, async as well too. We don't have to wait until the next community meeting to have those. All right, so we've got a handful of topics here for the community topics section. So let's move ahead on down to there then. And Dan, you want to kick us off here with some updates about live streams?
Yep. So tomorrow at 8:30 Pacific, we're going to have a informal live stream with Marcus and David from Equinix Metal / Equinix. We've had some streams related to the Equinix Metal provider in the past. We're actually going to be working on an Equinix provider, which is kind of the parent company now and has actually different APIs from the Equinix Metal services. That's building towards some additional streams we're going to do with them around the Equinix Fabric feature, which, if you're not familiar, Equinix kind of runs data centers and partners with a lot of the large cloud providers, and in doing so is able to basically provide you dedicated links between different cloud providers, between their data centers, which is definitely really cool. There are a number of features that need to go into an Equinix provider, as well as into the existing cloud providers for Crossplane to enable this functionality. And we're going to live stream working on that, just so folks who are interested in building providers and also interested in this multi-cloud functionality can kind of get an inside look at what that looks like. But definitely keep an eye out for additional streams coming up. We're going to kind of split those between our channels and theirs. The other thing mentioned there, which I know this has been on here for quite a while, and it's mostly just been scheduling back and forth with some folks from the Flux team, but we do have a live stream coming up. I know some of y'all have already seen the demo, or at least the manifest for the demo for that, but hopefully we can provide some more insight on how folks can use GitOps alongside Crossplane to kind of maximize the usage of the Kubernetes API for provisioning infrastructure within their organization. So keep an eye out for that one as well. And we're going to try to have that before KubeCon, but it's now kind of sneaking up on us. But we'll also be at the Flux booth giving a demo at KubeCon that week if you are going to be attending.
Is that like a scheduled thing, Dan, at the Flux booth?
You'd have to ask them, I guess. From, on our side, I know our booth is kind of like a constantly running thing. So I doubt that I think they'll informally, say like, this is going to happen at this time if you'd like to see it. But I don't think there's any sort of like, event time, although there is kind of like that meet the maintainers scheduled portion, I know. So
yeah, exactly.
Like that.
Okay, cool. Nice. Yeah, that's cool to do that, kind of have that integration between the two projects and kind of collaborating there. I like that a lot. That's great. Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Quick update on the incubation process for Crossplane. So since the last community meeting, we presented our proposal and due diligence and everything to the special interest group for app delivery. It was well received there. And we got a little bit of feedback from one of the SIG leads on our due diligence document. So they're engaged, and that's good. The next step there that they want to do, both the SIG and the technical oversight committee, is that they want to do in-user interviews with some of the adopters that we mentioned in the proposal, the production adopters of Crossplane. So we're trying to get that scheduled and make moves on that, which would be the final thing, preventing the SIG to give approval to the technical oversight committee, which would then open the 2-week public commentary period before the TOC can then vote. So there's a couple steps still left here, but we have done, most everything our side with the proposal and the due diligence and the presentation and all that sort of stuff. So that's all going pretty well. Okay, and then there's some resources here as well too. If you haven't checked out the proposal or you want to see some of the due diligence and stuff, that's there. The presentation to app delivery, that's also linked here, is it's kind of has some good introduction material to Crossplane. So feel free if anybody is wanting to reuse some of the slides or take that material and present it somewhere else. Feel free to use it completely. For whatever your needs are. You can use that Crossplane material for anything there. It's freely open for everybody. Cool. And then LFX mentorship. Rahul is continuing to do some of the work that he's been doing on Provider No Up recently. Rahul, do you want to go ahead and give us a quick update?
Sure. Hi. Since the design doc was completed and I made a PR on that as well, and now we have started with the implementation part, and probably with today's sync up with Dan and maybe Muhammad will also join. So I will just try to finish that, find out that as well. And then we'll move on to testing, hopefully.
Awesome. Yeah, good progress on that. And for folks to have a little bit more context on that project there, the whole idea around the provider no-op is that, in our integration end-to-end testing for Crossplane, like to test the composition engine or, various scenarios, it's very useful to have basically a mock provider that, we can kind of instruct it how to behave so that we can, exercise the integration tests with those scenarios in mind and have the provider behave the way we want to and make sure that the engine and machinery for composition and Crossplane as a whole around that provider is behaving the way that we want it to in response as well too. So it gives us a way to test scenarios in a consistent fashion. And so that's as the whole integration end-to-end testing effort that Rahul's been working on as part of the mentorship program this spring, I guess I was about to say summer, but spring, that's a great step there that will help us be able to write more complicated end-to-end testing scenarios and get better coverage. Awesome. Thanks, Rahul. I wanted to drop a note here on Crossplane related conformance and certification. This is just kind of mentioning this out to the community. and we can do more follow-ups later on. But essentially, we are wanting to start a certification program for Crossplane providers and then distributions of Crossplane as well. So we'll have, it's very similar to the upstream Kubernetes conformance and certification stuff that you may be familiar with already, where, to have a distribution or have a provider, there's a certain set of functionality, behavior, expectations, et cetera, that will be defined such that, if you meet all those criteria, then the provider can be certified. And so that will be in conjunction with the CNCF as well too, to establish that conformance program there. And if anyone is interested, if you own or maintain a provider, like the Equinix or your IBM provider, IBM cloud provider, or AWS, then please do reach out to Jared and Grant on like Crossplane Slack, or send us an email, whatever there, and we can kind of start talking about get you early in and involved in that conformance program and helping design it and stuff too. So you could be a part of collaborating on that as well too. So just reach out if anybody has any interest in getting their provider certified. We're happy to kind of do that in a very collaborative and open fashion. Cool. And then KubeCon EU, they chuckled a little bit earlier, Dan, when you mentioned that KubeCon's sneaking up on us, because I never feel like KubeCon's too sneaky. I feel like it's always like a 1,000-pound gorilla stomping around as it comes. But so for KubeCon EU, which is in just a couple of weeks, so like starting May 4th is the first day of KubeCon. There are a couple of opportunities for maintainers of the project. So, of any of the repos for Crossplane, anyone who's a maintainer can get involved in 2 different opportunities. One of them is an office hours Meet the Maintainers session that is on Wednesday, May 5th. And then there's also some, the CNCF gave us a booth in the Project Pavilion area that if you are interested in talking to users and representing Crossplane, answering questions and stuff like that, then there's some spots there that you can sign up for and participate as at the booth as well too. So 2 different opportunities there. Feel free to reach out to me, like on the Crossplane Slack, if you want to get to know more and talk more about that. One of the interesting things is that it is EU daylight hours, so it's not as North America friendly as the last KubeCon EU was last year. So it's it's going to be much more common, I think, for EU people to be getting involved than North America people will. But the opportunities are there for anybody who wants to get involved. No problems at all. Okay, and then and then also along with KubeCon is, we've talked about this before, the Crossplane Community Day that's coming up. That is on the first day of KubeCon as a co-located event on May 4th. There's a link here in the doc to see the schedule, see all the talks. You can get registered there if you haven't already, but it's going to be a really cool day full of some good information, good speakers, good talks that we're all really excited about. And a thank you to everybody here on the call too that submitted talks, that got them recorded, and everything is in and the content is all lined up. So I think we're looking good to go there. I'm really excited about that. And thanks everybody for the efforts on getting that together and every part that everyone played in that. And do you want to take the next one here on new org members?
Yeah, for sure. So I just added this in, and I'm going to put it in our template for each of our meetings, just so we can recognize new folks that are have joined the Crossplane org on GitHub. So we introduced this process to make it a little more formal for folks to be able to be assigned things. I know many people on this call are not probably currently in the Crossplane org, but you are eligible to do so. You do nominate yourself after talking to 2 sponsors who are current org members. And then every org member request has to be approved by the steering committee. In the Crossplane/org repo, there is documentation on how you can do that. And this morning, Alper went ahead and requested org membership and was endorsed by myself and Hassan, who are current org members. And there's a PR open pending steering committee approval to go ahead and add him. So welcome to Alper, and encourage anyone else who's interested to also apply.
But I just dropped the link there underneath that to the README for becoming a member. So anybody who wants to become a member of the GitHub org for Crossplane, the link is right there, and you can follow that process that Dan was just describing. And we're happy to help out with that as well too. So check that out if you want to join the Crossplane org. Dan, has the process been automated yet to sync the new members from the YAML to the GitHub API?
No, it is not. But we do have the PR open with that functionality. And I would guess post KubeCon, when we have some other kind of announcements going out, that we will likely set that up to automate some of our org. And I know Steven, who recently joined Upbound, is also interested in driving some of that. So I would expect that we get that automated hopefully pretty soon.
Awesome. Cool. Yep. Happy to add people manually. Until then, just let me know. I'm happy to take care of that.
Sounds good.
All right. Moving right along here, making good progress. So the next thing we have on the agenda doc is around the provider GCP beta. So Dan, do you want to go ahead and fill us in on that one and the progress there?
Yeah, absolutely. So provider GCP beta has been bootstrapped. If you're interested in the motivation for that, you can check out the RFC issue on provider GCP, which we got some great feedback on. And we kept that open for quite a while to give folks the opportunity to provide feedback. Importantly, and this is going to be kind of a driving factor for being more clear in our release notes for providers, there is going to be some functionality changes of beta resources in provider GCP because of this, notably the cluster resource, the node group resource, and I think that's it actually. Cloud SQL also uses a beta GCP API, but I believe it's remained stable. So from this point forward, all resources that go into the standard provider GCP will rely on V1 Google APIs. So we can ensure that there will only be additions to functionality there and they won't ever drop fields. We had previously run into issues because all of these services come from the same Go module. And so we had issues with trying to bump to newer versions where functionality was added to a resource that was dependent on a V1 API, but we had another resource that was dependent on a beta API where it was dropping functionality, which we didn't want to do. So now we're taking the approach of separating all of the beta resources into its own provider. You can use that alongside, you can use those two providers alongside each other until we have generic cross-resource references, which this is also kind of a motivator for that. You won't be able to actually, perform references. So for instance, if you create a beta version or the provider GCP beta version of a cluster, you're not going to be able to reference a network from provider GCP. However, if we do have generic references in the future, that should be possible. But overall, this should allow both added stability and the ability to get features faster, depending on the type of environment you're operating in. So we will go ahead and do that. And the PR is open, but needs some refactoring to go ahead and fix up some of those resources that depend on beta APIs in the GCP, provider GCP. And so those will be changing in the coming release in terms of a few fields that are enabled there.
Then will there be any like migration steps or anything to kind of move on to this new sort of schema set, I guess?
Yeah, so if you wanted to transition to using provider GCP beta, it could be as simple as taking down the provider GCP and installing provider GCP beta. It could also be if you want to use them alongside each other, you could use you could just switch the group of the instance to provider GCP beta. If you're using provider GCP currently, functionality of one of the resources changes. Once again, this is notably the cluster API and the node group API. It's only additional fields that are there currently, to my knowledge, at least last time I checked. So what would happen in that case is likely nothing, actually, but your fields would just be stripped off, right? They would be pruned away, the extraneous ones that are only applicable to the beta API. So there shouldn't be too much disruption. That being said, we'll definitely test some of those scenarios. And also, if you are depending on that provider right now, I would encourage you to look at the release notes for the upcoming release for Provider GCP. Provider GCP beta will start on its own Semver cadence, right? So its first release will be 0.1, and it will operate mostly independently from Provider GCP moving forward.
Cool, that makes sense, Dan. Thanks for helping explain that. Okay. Then that's everything that was in the agenda doc ahead of time, but I will open the floor for any other topics, questions, PRs, etc., that other folks might have on their minds. Okay. Well, if there are no other topics that folks want to bring up in this venue right here, then we are always available for chatting on Slack and GitHub issues discussions. So always feel free to reach out on those couple of other options there. And then we can go ahead and adjourn for the week then.
Thanks, Jared.
All righty, thanks everybody. Good to see y'all.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.